All right, so welcome everybody. Is this evening we're doing an interview with JP. I practiced how to pronounce your name before I came on. I swear to God, but I'll butcher it now if I try.
You won't.
She is the author of A Forest Without Trees, and I'm going to go ahead and give her the mic and let her introduce herself and talk about her book.
Cool. So yeah, my name's JP, and I started writing back in like officially to write a book in 2020. My day job is something else, but I have found that I have a passion for writing. I am very much an artist, and so I tend to work in a lot of different mediums, and writing is now one that I'm really focused on. And A Forest Without Trees is a eco-punk fantasy that is it's a series, and so the first book and the second book are both out, and the third one is in the works, and the rest are also on their way as well. But ultimately, it explores our relationship with nature and the way that we could survive the climate breakdown that we're currently living in. It's just kind of how I imagine our world might be then. Um, yeah, of course, with that.
Okay. So, and I only had the time to read the first one,
Oh
so
yeah, yeah. I was actually surprised you finished it also. So cool.
oh.
I'm a slow reader, so I respect anyone who can be like read something quickly.
Um, that's always because my I have a brother who's a speed reader. He gets book read in like 2 to 4 hours, and I always feel so slow because it takes me like 8 to 10 hours to read a book, and I always feel
Oh,
so
I'm
slow.
slower than that. So yeah, if you ever feel like you're not too fast or not fast enough, just look at me. I'm going real slow. Yeah.
Okay. So, first question I wanted to pose is because I actually had to look this up. So, what exactly is ecopunk in your mind? Because I had to look it up.
That's a good question. Ecopunk, I didn't know the term until I'd already written most of the book. It's under the umbrella of cyberpunk. So if you know cyberpunk as a genre, like a subsect of sci-fi, then it kind of falls under ecopunk in that, from my understanding, it's kind of this idea of like steampunk would be the steam engine is the main power energy source and the way that the world kind of is revolving around that. And so for me, ecopunk was in the way that the planet is a key part of the technology that's in the story, and because it is that dichotomy between how people relate to nature, it's kind of the two different kinds of technologies that are commingling and stuff. In the story themselves, people have these superpowers, which are called extracerebral abilities, and I wanted to play with how technology could be expressed with those abilities, but also like beyond those abilities. So that's where the ecopunk for me is that the planet itself is a key part of how energy is created on the planet, as well as how people communicate and the technologies that are kind of deriving from it.
Okay, so I'm going to kind of assume maybe that's something that comes up in the second book because I didn't
Yeah,
really see
it's
much of that in
like
the
the
first one.
story. My friend Silas, I think he's down in there. He's described it to me quite well. Is that it's more of a serial in that like the story is going to unfold more as it goes. And so the first book, you're getting introduced to Tara and the world of the Federation, and getting to know the games and these different things, and revealing some stuff about her past. But once you go into the second book, you start to learn more about the world beyond the Federation, and especially in the third book and beyond that, it's like you start to understand where her world is and where she's really coming from, as opposed to how she's in this place that everyone else is. Um, so the story will unfold in kind of a variety of ways with her arc in terms of what happens with her, but it really is about all the other players and how everything kind of is just unraveling because all the characters are very interrelated.
Okay, that for me that actually helps a lot because there were parts of the first book that kind of like confused me a little bit. So that actually makes a lot more sense. So
Okay, cool. Yeah.
um okay. So I did want is where did you get the idea for the Federation's culture, for lack of a better word, to be this kind of entertainment focus? It almost gives me like an ancient Rome vibe where the emperor created the Colosseum and started the games to try to distract the populace from how crappy their life was.
Yeah, you pretty much just summed it up right there. So much of the inspiration of the story comes from the fact that we're still telling the same stories over and over and over. And our struggles are very much the same. They just have a different technology or a different setting. And so I look at the hierarchies that we're living in today, and I just kind of changed what the qualifiers of those hierarchies are. So instead of it being things like race or gender or where you were born or whatever money status, it became about games and that kind of culture around points. And I see that already existing in our culture with the amount of, like if you just take social media as an example of this, where it's like you feel like you're gaining status by having X number of followers or X number of views or X number of like coins that arrive in like a live. And like that's all fun and great. And it kind of boosts your dopamine and so then that like encourages it. And we are a very voyeuristic society. And I think that we really enjoy that because if we didn't, it would be we probably would be more careful with how much we actually share on these things. So I just see it really as a reflection of right now. And because I live in a, like I like, so my website is nofi.ca. So no-fi being like we have hi-fi and lo-fi, and then I'm kind of like there's no-fi. And it's a little joke for myself because I like the idea of, well, how can I repurpose something or not just reusing it, but like let's not throw it away, let's remake it into something else and see how we can mend what we have going on. Because again, I'm a big artist, and so I'm a fan of fiber. I like to spin yarn, and I like the idea of weaving and sewing and knitting, and all of these things are metaphors for being a human as well. And so much of our life right now and the way that the planet is a reflection of our own pollution that we're what we put in our bodies, but also the way that we interact with people. It's all the same reflections of the plastics that's accumulating in the oceans in my mind. And so I see that as like the culture of the Federation is kind of what our most toxic selves could be like, but under this like guise of what you were saying, this like Colosseum, like the gladiators and like distraction and all this. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Um, I did notice is like you had tried to kind of modify the language so that it sounded futuristic. Was there like a process for picking that, or like how did you like decide
Yeah,
how
there
you're going
was.
to evolve the
Some of it was
language?
just the word sounded cool. I heard like there was like a list of old Victorian slang, and I was like, yeah, that word. And then I like read it wrong because I'm somewhat dyslexic, and I added an extra vowel or consonant. I'm like, that's fine. We'll just leave it that way. But other times I would be like, I want to say something, but I don't want to use this phrase that we normally use. So then I would go on to the thesaurus and just search for another word that was similar, or I would take it into this like street slang thesaurus online, the Urban Dictionary or Urban Thesaurus, and just look amongst that, and then take parts of that and just kind of make up my own words sometimes. So it depended on what kind of inspired me. I also played a lot with other languages, so I'd be like, "What's another language? Like in another language, what's that word? What would they call it? And then how can I adapt it?" Because again, this is like post climate breakdown. The idea being that our borders have all dissolved and we're all like mixing in different ways, and our languages would all be kind of mixed together in different ways. And so that's how I saw it.
Okay. And the kind of a continuation on that is I noticed in certain sections, mostly involving the character V, try not to give any spoilers here.
Mm.
Um, I noticed mostly that in her sections is she and her were changed to Z and I guess like also her but with an I. Was
Mhm.
there a reasoning behind that? What was
Yeah.
the
So
reason
when
behind
I was first writing that character, I was like, are they a he or a she? And it was like, it was a bit surprising because I was like, this character is not presenting in either of those. And so I decided non binary. But then when I was originally writing it with they, them pronouns, it became a headache because of the amount of other characters and the interactions. It was like, this is too hard to write. And at that time, I also didn't have the same skill sets of writing that I've developed in the last few years. But I went through the different pronoun options that I'd found lists for, and those are the ones that I chose. And I recognize that there's a whole bunch of different ones, and that not everyone will identify with those particular pronouns, and that some people find them like a little jarring to see a third pronoun as an option that's there. But yeah.
Okay, so it's just a non-binary indicator is what it was.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes so much more sense now.
Yep. Yep.
That was, I kept worried it's just like, did two people write this and like one person not know English very well, or it just um but that makes so much more sense. Oh God, brain freeze. Um
I love that you read the book and that you just finished it last night and that you're like trying to be like, what did I read last night?
it's like, what did I read? I read something, it was there. Um that actually does kind of lead me to a different question is so you have the Federation, you have this again, try not to give too many spoilers, but you basically have three groups going on.
Yes. Yes.
Um, like if you were to kind of give it like geographic scope, like really like how big is the Federation? Because from the descriptions, it seems like it might be kind of small, but that could just be a perception issue.
Yeah, it's a perception thing. I've had this from some other comments as well. You can imagine that the Federation itself as a whole is probably like the size of Europe, let's just say. So it's not tiny, but it's like, it's also not as big as like the continent of North America, for example. And then beyond that is like the rest of the world. And so, not to give too many spoilers away, but the idea is that if the water levels rose and our planet kind of was in all this disarray, when things started to calm or as things changed, how would humans exist and like which populations and where and how would they relate to each other? And so I imagined this very isolated group of people who originally they're just like they would be people who fled into the mountain bunkers and like held out in there for hundreds of years, and then when they came out they resettled the area around them, and that's what the Federation becomes. And so the people that were there were the people who didn't go into the bunkers, and they're kind of all over the planet already. And so in my imagination I was like, well, if you didn't know that there was other people that existed out there, like how would you perceive the rest of the world? And so
So
yeah.
kind of like a I don't know if you're familiar with the 100 series.
I've heard people refer to this as well. Yeah.
You know, other
Yes. I
people say that
haven't, I
too.
don't know it myself, but I've heard people refer to it. Yeah. Um, yeah.
So, basically the premise is a bunch of humans escaped to a space station to
Mhm.
escape a nuclear war, and they thought everybody on Earth would be dead. So
Mhm.
they went back to Earth just to find out people weren't dead, and
Mhm.
it caused a whole bunch of issues.
Pretty
That's
much.
pretty much
Yeah.
the basis of the story.
Yeah. And the way that I wrote the story is that the reader is going to be introduced to the rest of the world, kind of the way the Federation is introduced to the rest of the world. So you find out as a reader, kind of in the first three books, it's like you're learning all this stuff about the Federation and about the world and how it's playing out for everyone. And then it's like more things will unfold, but you have all the pieces for the most part at that point. So it's like you can see the world more in its entirety. And part of the reason why I think that like I get that comment about the first book is because when I first wrote it, I had the books 1, 2, and 3 as the first book, not individual ones, but it got too long, and so I
Oh,
had
and so
to.
you did the split thing.
Yeah, yeah.
So another thing I noticed is it seemed like a large number of the rebel group for lack, or of the set. Is it pronounced
The
SEDS?
SEDS, yeah, the SEDS.
SEDS? Um, seems like they had infiltrated the Federation to quite a degree because you had like little ones like popping up all over the place, which I actually found like really interesting. It's just like, dang, how many of them are in here?
I'm like, what kind of spoilers do you want me to give away with this? But yeah.
Um, I mean, I don't mind spoilers at all. Like people can give me the entire plot for a book, and that's more likely to get me to read it than trying to hide stuff. But that's just me.
No,
It's more of a
yeah.
personal thing. Um, Feel
Well,
free to give as much
let's
info
just
as you
say
like.
that I created a whole society, um, and because I couldn't just have like the key main characters, which is why there's so many characters in the story. Because there had to be people who were, you know, the like the king type person or the like noble type person, and then the, like the person who works at the grocery store or the bakery or whatever. And then I had to include, you know, the garbage collectors or the scrappers because they're really key. Um, and so like I do mention a lot of like these different characters, and they might seem insignificant, but as you read through, you'll go, oh, okay, yeah, that is significant. And it's one of those stories that like once you read it, you'll, if you're one of those people that would read a story again, when you read it the second time, you're going to see so much more, because right in the very first chapter I give away a lot. um, and there's definitely other people in the Federation that live within those boundaries that are yeah, like I'll use the terminology from the book, is that they're not playing the same games. Mhm.
Yeah, I know. So it was very much a spider web, like how these little connections all over the place, and it really like really made you think as you were reading it that like, okay, the first few times I didn't quite get it, but near about the halfway point to near the end, I was like, okay, now I know this character is going to pop up somewhere else. Now I'm like almost Easter egg hunting for him. It's like, okay,
Yes.
where's this person going to show up next?
Yes, and for sure, just a note for the readers is that there are some things that are in the first book you're going to have to wait a little bit for those to come through, but I do promise to fulfill the things that I've laid out for you. Yeah.
No drop plots.
Mm-mm. Trying really hard not to. Yeah.
Okay. So we have JJ asking, when are you visiting the US?
Not anytime soon that I know of. If I do, you will be the first to know, JJ, because I know you want signed copies of my books. But I'll talk a little bit about the artwork because I did this myself. As I say, I'm an artist first, and so I don't know. I like working in all these different mediums, and so I took the photographs of some of these plants. I adapted this vector art, and then I drew this digitally and just did the whole cover myself. Because why not? But also because I wanted the covers to have significance to kind of what's happening in the story. And so this particular cover, it can make people wonder like, what's this book really about? And that's fine. But this is actually the scene in the quarter circuit where she wakes up in the alleyway that morning. That's what this scene is representing. And so each of the covers do have a significance. And so the second book cover is this one, which is definitely a lot less like kind of happy feeling. It's got more of an ominous thing. And this is also more metaphorical with the flowery roots coming out of her mouth. But that speaks to the kind of eco-punk side of it, where there's the group of people who live outside of the Federation have the ability to communicate through the root networks of trees, and so the mycelium networks and things like that. And so there is that knowledge of how to communicate through those trees as one method. And there's some other means of communicating that are beyond just the technology, and so that's what we explore as things go on. But that particular scene is kind of intense, and so but I wanted to signify what was going on beyond just the physical aspect of what was happening in that moment, because it lends into what's going to happen in book 3, where things get a little bit more I'm going to say surreal, or kind of like etheric, in terms of how the dreams start to dream spaces kind of play out. Um, but yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it almost kind of sounds like an avatar thing where like the people actually are kind of able to connect with the
Interesting.
planet itself.
Yeah, yeah, in a sense, yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I thought you meant like Avatar, like they're gonna like climb into other people's bodies or whatever, and I was like, well, sort of in like the video game worlds, but yeah, um, yeah, definitely, like, because that's where the eco punk for me made sense, because again, like for me, it's all starting from kind of now in terms of a time frame. And actually this brings up something else, is I wrote a novella. It's called The Great Unrest, and it's meant to be the prequel to A Forest Without Trees. And right now I have one. There might be a few more that come after as I'm inspired to write them, but they're meant to be how did we get from the old era to where the story takes place. And so the Great Unrest 2057 is actually going to be released on August 15th, part of a epic release party where a whole bunch of these other authors are there. So if anyone who's releasing a book in August wants to jump on that. But the idea of having this like society of people who chose not to flee into the mountains, but then to rather learn how to adapt with nature, and how, like, what could people potentially adapt to? How can we evolve when we're exposed to these kinds of storms or these kinds of energies from the planet that are shifting, and like animals and diseases and different things that are going to be impacting our way of life. And so just kind of, I imagine that some people would tune in to our natural rhythms and ways of communicating beyond the kind of dimensions that we're so used to right now. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. I know we had said we were going to go for an hour, but honestly, like I said, unless we really want to start digging into spoilers, that was
Well, I mean, I'm happy to give away spoilers, but I don't know. If anyone doesn't want to hear spoilers, you can just leave. Then I'll just share with.
all right. Spoiler part of the conversation. Y'all get anyone who
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
want
If
to
you
know
don't want to
the
hear
boss.
this, now you got to leave. What do you want to know?
Oh God, now I have to go down the list here.
Because like I know in chapter 2 you get the first, like, oh, okay, that's the like relationship, uh, like found family kind of thing, right, with Tristan and Tara.
Okay,
I found
so
that pretty.
honestly, the two I would say out of the characters that I found interesting were Kragan and Stone. They both seem to have kind of a narcissism
Yeah,
to
good. You picked up on that.
to put it
I was
lightly.
like hitting you over the head with it. Yeah, Stone is a piece of work. Um, yeah, I'm regularly creeped out by him. It's very creepy. And then Kragan he's messed up. And as you read through, especially in book 3, you start to see more of why he's so messed up, and it's Stone's fault. Yeah, for the most
I
part.
was kind of getting that feeling. I was even in the first
Yeah,
book. I was getting that
yeah.
feeling. It's like, okay, there's something wrong with you.
Mm-hmm.
However, something tells me this guy made it worse.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, so Stone is definitely, and like I have this one, he's like 80-ish, and so I print off a copy for him and he reads it. And every single time he gives me my feedback, he always includes, you need to make Stone less likable. And I'm like, how much less, like, what do I
Like,
need to
can I
do?
make
He's already so horrible. And what he does, so I hope I lived up to that for him in some way, because in the third book, some stuff comes out about what happens in, like, am I allowed to give this spoiler? Yeah. You want to know that, so Kragan's father was the main operator. He was the, like, leader of the Federation.
Yeah, you
And
got like this dynasty going on.
yes, and so he and Stone never got along, and Stone actually, so that part where he was talking about the beast in the wilderness that killed their grandfather and all this stuff. It's like a very small part, so I wouldn't be surprised, because it's not like I'm not hitting anyone over the head at the first book with some of these backstory things. But there is a part in the backstory where Stone essentially sets up uh, his brother in an attempt to unalive him, but in the
Well,
process,
he had the hots for his brother's wife.
yeah,
So yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so he tries to unalive him, but it goes awry, and he ends up unaliving his father and his other brother instead. And so it's this like, that was a mistake. But the consequences of that later kind of come out, and then Stone unalives Albion is his name, so Kragan's father. But then he blames it on Kragan, because circumstances of how that happens, he's able to pin it on Kragan. And so then Kragan believes that he's killed his father the whole time. Um, and so in book 3, that's when they find out that that's not true, and and Stone has been manipulating him his entire life, and leading him to believe these false truths. There's some other stuff that's in there with other manipulation with his sister in the way that he's supposed to believe things that she's done that she hasn't done, or um, who she's truly a victim of, because it's not Zedric who she's truly a victim of. Um, so it's a little bit like soap opera like in terms of like these complicated family
Mhm.
relationship dynamics in these dynasties, because it is that kind of idea where it's like these bloodlines are going to be carried through and ensuring that they are carried through. Hmm.
Is I always had the question with I think his name is pronounced Garrett, is Tara's brother.
Yeah, Garrett. Yeah.
Is it was always kind of one of those things that like I'm curious how sincere his desire was. Like obviously he doesn't want to marry um Carrie.
Yeah.
I think is how you pronounce it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um I still always kind of got like this underlying vibe that maybe he was setting Tara up for something with this whole escape plan because it seemed like they
Hmm.
got
Hmm.
thwarted and
He,
captured awful easily.
yeah, he's definitely not the brightest tool in the shed when it comes to like street smarts, let's say. Um, and so he had to kind of not be ready to like do what he had to do. He like emotionally, mentally, he was like, I really want to do this, but like, was he capable of actually pulling it off? No. And so his character actually struggles a lot with having to mask his entire self throughout so much of the book. Um, and so the reader gets to slowly understand what his real intentions are as he's navigating so much of it. And um, it's weird because he's asexual, because and that comes up a bit more in the second book, because that's like he's not interested in anybody. Um, but it's weird because his storyline with Carrie or Kari, however you want to say it, is like the one like kind of romance in a way where like they're kind of be together. Um, and the way that I'm seeing it is it's actually like it's kind of that idea where it's like you can have a love that's not like a sexual love, like you can have intimacy without it being just like this physical connection. And so that's kind of what I was exploring with their relationship, but then under all of this pressure of them having to couple and have children and all this stuff. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I've got to know, please tell me that Prin gets more screen time in the second book. I think I loved her dearly.
Oh,
She
Prin
was
is
so
so much fun.
awesome.
She doesn't get as much screen time as I want her to have, and that's part of the problem. Some of these characters are so awesome, but yeah, she gets some screen time in the second one, and a little bit in the third one. I'm gonna be bringing her out a little bit more um, as her relationship with Nyla kind of goes, because she's part of that storyline.
Okay.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, yeah, Prin's fun. I'm glad you liked her.
like I wanted to go back and like reread those scenes again because it was just like I
Oh,
love this girl. She's so saucy.
she
I love
is.
her.
Yeah, she's fun. Cool. I'm glad you like it.
I did kind of have a because I'm assuming that there's some kind of education system. So like
Yeah.
the compounds, like
Yes.
are those just for people that they've captured or like do like
No.
regular kids go there too?
Yes. No, yeah. So it's called the Boost Academy. And so the Boost Academy has different grades. And so grade A would be like the top tier families would send their kids there, and they're the ones who have the most potential as a player. But then the Boost Academy has like that's just for like the people who are players in the recreation in the games, but then they have subs like different wings, I guess you could say, for like the security children or whomever, like as they're being raised. And so it's not like a school in the sense that they would be commingling classes and like here's your history class and your math class and all these things. It would be like here's the information and the like the skills we want you to learn so that you can do your job properly. So the Boost Academy for like the grade F that Tara and them are in is more of a detention center than anything, but it's under the guise of it being like we're re-educating you, we're giving you this opportunity to better yourself in the Boost Academy. Yeah, but it's not really better.
Yeah, no, no,
No,
no.
no.
No. I mean, it just I kind of got the basically like the people in the grade F were basically people that they had given up on, and it was just like at that point just waiting for them to turn 18 and then getting rid of them pretty much.
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, there's some stuff in there with some spoilers, um, with kind of the like so like the idea that I was thinking was like, well, if there's no capitalism, then how would you still extort people and like still have that kind of thing going on? And so I was looking at it in regards to viewing, and so like that viewing count and those credits that you would gain from being a viewer of those things. And so I kind of was like, well, it would just be like kind of the way we have, what are they called? Um, I don't remember. I don't remember what they're called, but they're like it's like a imagine like a big warehouse full of phones on tripods or whatever, and they're all streaming videos and like automatically liking stuff. And so it's like that kind of server farm idea where the people in grade F were then like forced to view and like consume all of this nonsense, not for their own gain, but for someone else to then just have the credits and they don't have to do it themselves. That kind of
Okay.
thing. There's some other layers in there that are a little bit more disturbing, so we don't need to go there.
Yeah. That's okay.
Yeah.
Like there was like you could tell that there was kind of a cat there's kind of this caste system where you had the players basically at the players and the controllers at the top of the system, and then
Mm-hmm.
I think you also had like you had the enforcers, you had the scrappers, you have the clinicians, which are obviously doctors.
Yep.
Were there other positions that like didn't make it into the book, or did you just kind of come up with them as you needed them?
Well, like when I first originally wrote it, I was just kind of pantsing it. So there was a lot that I didn't include. And so when I went back and I added more stuff in, it was like the geeks and the people who are drivers. And like they're all just kind of like a subsect of other, it's not as like, what's the word? It doesn't matter as much like where they came from. They just have like, oh, these kinds of titles. Like someone who's this one guy, his name is Bit, and he is a driver. So he like will chauffeur people around and do these services, but he's also a monster truck driver, and and that's like the game that he plays is being a monster truck driver. Which I kind of wish I could have included that scene somewhere in the story, but oh well. And so yeah, I just kind of imagined what different things would be needed, and geeks are another one where it's like you need people who know how to use computers and to make things go. So yeah, builders. Mhm.
Okay, so and I did actually kind of find that interesting because like at first I expected like when because I think the first game that was really shown was them forcing Tara to watch Garrett in his kind of adventure game whatever he was doing at the time,
Mhm.
and at first I kind of thought at first I was thinking that well, probably all the games are like this, that they're all these high stakes,
Mhm.
dangerous types of games. But then you were introducing other things like, ping pong and tennis and just
Yes.
like these really basic ones that, were still available and I kind of thought about it as basically the equivalent between like kind of a Twitch streamer who does shooting games and then you have like cozy streams where you just have somebody playing Animal Farm.
100%. Yeah, exactly. So the way I envision the parks where people live are kind of like little medieval cities. So they're more pedestrian friendly, but then they have like all sort like every road or a streetway is going to be lined with places that people can play games and like arcade games and different kinds of things. And I just imagined any kind of sport or game or activity that I could and just kind of put them all in there. I was so like I don't know how much of it's in the first book, but like I imagine there being like these moon boards that people would be rock climbing, and then like there could be like people doing skateboarding across like the top levels of the city, and just kind of taking it to as far as I could. But then which games were classics that no one's gonna stop playing? Things like hopscotch or Snake, when you're like technically collecting the eggs and your snake gets longer and longer, and things like that. Tetris. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So, so what is, did you kind of like, did you base the location of it really anywhere, or is it still kind of up in the air as far as like where, like geography wise,
Yeah, I didn't
this is
want to
all taking
commit
place?
too specifically because I'm not an expert on geography, but I'm imagining it's kind of more in like northwest Asia area, like kind of like north. Where what is that? Like I envision like India because of the like huge mountains, but then just kind of that whole area would have changed landscape. So it's still very much in my fantasy mind because 600 years is not enough time for the tectonic plates to really shift that much on the planet. But in my mind, it has. So, it's yeah, it's not nowhere specific geographical space, and yeah, take that as you will.
So sometimes that's a way to do it. Sometimes the best place is no place at all.
Yeah.
So, okay. Doesn't look like we have any questions from the audience. So I kind of racked my brain for those last, for those last two.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to read it and then to ask questions that were like more specific about the story itself. Because yeah, it's a book that I had a lot of fun writing, and I'm enjoying where it's going. The original concept for the book came from a dream that I had in 2006, and since then it's been really interesting to see how all of this kind of just kind of not fell into place, but really like started to click as I was starting to write. And so, yeah, I'm excited to share it more with people on here. I'm just sharing my process of writing. It's just going to be a slow process because there's going to be at least 9 books. So, what was the most challenging part about writing it? That's a good question. There's a lot of challenging things. Um, I think I think honestly part of it is just being able to properly communicate my idea in the words that I use. Um, because it's like that's all that I can like those that's how the story is going to be transmitted is through the words. And so I have a lot of self-doubt about my ability to write things because growing up I didn't learn how to read and write properly in the public school system. And so and I probably was misdiagnosed and I like probably have dyslexia or something. And so my like confidence was so much lower when I first started writing. But then as I applied the like knowledge that I was learning about, oh yeah, here's sentence structures and here's like better ways to get this point across and like a more concise way of saying something. And people like Silas offering lots of feedback that has been really helpful. And then I can apply that. And then now I don't feel as like, oh, I suck because I know I don't. I'm like, it's a good book. And I can keep growing. But so now the challenge is really just um, like getting it out there and like being proud of it and sharing it with people. And the most rewarding part is just having people read it and like the story and tell me that. Um, it's fun. I like had set these goals for myself and then I was shocked how quickly I attained those goals. So I was like, okay, I should shoot a little bit higher. And having people come up to me and tell me how much they like the book, or ask me questions about stuff or want to know, like, is this where this is going? I kind of get that sense. It's fun and I like it. So yeah. What advice would you give to new writers? To just write and see what happens. Carve out a chunk of time if you're someone who needs to have that consistency and just like 20 minutes start writing something. If you're aiming to write a story, you don't know where it's going to go, just write it, kind of just blurt it out, get what you can out, and then you can go back and refine that after. But yeah, and then just have fun with it. Don't take yourself so seriously. Yeah, that's my advice.
All right. So, y'all heard it is go check out JP's Solanki-Davie. Did I
Davy,
get that
yeah,
even close to
yeah,
right?
yeah. Solanki-Davie. Which thread in your story do you find most interesting or care about the most? Silas is just throwing all the questions out now. Um, find the most interesting or care the most about? That's a hard question, Silas. I have so many characters that I'm like, this person's character arc. Um, I'm gonna go with my favorite character, who's a side character named Cole. He's a scrapper. He's fantastic. He has a lot more presence in the third book when his character gets to be kind of initiated in a sense. Um, and he was a character who I introduced not realizing who they were going to become and how key they were. And now that I know, I'm just like, oh, I can't. This is like, I'm so happy when I like think about him and that arc that's gonna happen. It's okay, silence. It's all good. Because there's some like endings that I was like, how is that gonna happen? And then that character solved that problem for me. So mhm.
And sometimes that's what we gotta do too. It's just like, okay, who can I pull like out of the back that I didn't really have any plans for that can fill this role now that I need somebody
Mhm.
to do it.
And it's like and it's beyond that too because it's like they it's like yeah you're perfect for it but then it's like your backstory actually makes more sense now that this is where you're going and it's like it filled in all of their holes as well as the holes in the story. So anyway, um, I'm just going to take one moment now before I forget because I just remembered this. That anyone who sees this, if you feel so compelled, you can go to my link tree in my bio. There is a fundraising GoFundMe thing that's there. There's a woman who doesn't have a link tree on here. She is going to be a living liver donor for her cousin who's not a Canadian citizen. And so she's being flown in to have this urgent surgery, life saving care. And because it's not financed by Canadian healthcare, and I know a lot of people here are from the United States and going, I wish that I could have that too. So yeah, if you're able to or share that with anyone who might be able to support her, Francine is a wonderful author on TikTok as well who could use some help. So yeah,
Okay. So y'all heard her. Go check out the link in her bio and let's get this lovely lady where she needs to be to help somebody with her liver.
yeah,
So thank you for being my first interview, JP. It was greatly appreciated, and hopefully we'll get to do more in the future.
yeah.
If anybody in the chat cares to want to be my next interview, feel free to send me a message. Also, I just launched my Discord, which you can get from my link tree in my bio. So if anybody would like to join me there, you all would be more than welcome. I will be downloading this interview and uploading it to my YouTube with JP's permission so
Mhm.
that other people can hopefully get to see this in the future as well. And I think that is all for now. So unless anybody in the chat or if there's something you'd like to add yourself, JP, also go ahead and pimp your second and third book too if you like to,
Yeah,
and we'll
sure.
close out.
Yeah, so book one and book two are out right now. You can get them on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. You can buy it directly from me at nofi.ca. If you're in Canada, I can get you a signed copy. If you're in my area, I'm going to be at a book festival. And if you know that my area, then you'll know where that is. I'm not going to say it here. In May, and I'm really excited. So you can come find me there. Book three will be out in November or December of this year. And I do have book 4 through 9 in the plotting phases, and so I will be looking for people who might want to beta read or alpha read. So if you want to catch up, then you can jump in on that with me. That'd be super helpful and get them out there faster. But yeah, thank you so much for having me. I didn't realize that I was your first interview, so I feel very special.
So hopefully the first of many more. So
I'm sure. I'm sure.
anyway, so we'll catch everybody later. Feel free to follow both of us, and like we both said, check out our links. And everybody have a good night.
Yeah.
So gonna go ahead and
Bye.
disconnect.
Thank you so much.
You have a good night.
You too.